What's up, college football fans? Sonoy Valente here once again with the Mean Green Show. Today, joined by Eric Henry from SB Nation, and we're going to talk a little bit about Jaylon Robinson, the UCF wide receiver who's re-entered his name into the transfer portal. But before we get into all of that, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football recruiting, the G5 football world, conference realignment, coaching carousel, any or all of the above, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that is truly all that we talk about. Eric, thank you so much. I know you just jumped off another pod. Where can everybody find what it is that you do for college football and everything that you have going on?
First off, Snow, appreciate you having me on. As always a nice time to hop on here. The Mean Green Faithful. Definitely looking forward to getting out to Denton this year. But you can find me on Twitter at Eric C. Henry _. You can find my Conference USA and FIU coverage at Underdog Dynasty, which is SB Nation's home for Group of 5 football coverage. UnderdogDynasty.com, at Underdog Dynasty on Twitter.
And you're going to have the one and only Coach Seth Luttrell coming out pretty soon, right, on the podcast?
Yeah. I know you and I are recording this to bring the listeners behind the curtain here. You and I are recording this May. Oh man, my mind's all everywhere. Right, almost said March. May 2nd. So that podcast should be out later this week, probably close to the 4th or the 5th.
Well, that's exciting stuff. North Texas fans, keep an eye out for that because it's always good whenever we get to hear from the main man himself. Well, all right. So for those of you who don't know, Eric Henry, although he covers FIU, is a alumni of UCF, and UCF is your team. Am I correct as far as who you root for?
I because of my role as a college football reporter, I have divested my college football rooting interests. However, I am a Knight. I am a proud Knight. That has never changed. So I wish nothing but success for the program. That is my politically correct way of answering that question. You can read between the lines.
Okay, yeah. I would anybody else just follow his Twitter during a UCF game, and it gets a little unpolitical. But anyway, all right. So Jaylon Robinson, I think this is really interesting. I really wanted to hear your thoughts on a few things as it pertains to Jaylon specifically. So Jaylon originally came out of All Saints High School. Was it, had an electrifying high school career, whatever. Went to Oklahoma, spent 1 year there, redshirted everything, and decided to hit the transfer portal for that 2019 season, I believe. And I believe that was the year, I was before this 1 year, transfer without penalty. Sure. So he set out 2019, then 2020 at UCF. Really, had a great season, 55 receptions for 979 yards. And, just 6 touchdowns, really good year. 2021, the production wasn't quite there. Maybe that was accredited to Dylan Gabriel going down or amongst other things. I'm not sure, but 18 receptions for 322 yards and 2 touchdowns. So obviously a bit of a dip, but however, I think Jaylon Robinson is one of the best G5 receiver. I just think, I did watch him play a bit in high school. He played at the same high school as my nephew, so maybe I'm biased, but he just always jumped off the screen, always jumped off the field when we were watching him. Just really electrifying talent. My question is for you is, I saw to my knowledge, he was involved in UCF's spring football, and yes. He was the tapes I saw, he was lighting it up and probably going to look like maybe to be wide receiver 1 for them. However, him entering the portal now, do you know, first off, will he have to sit a year, or the fact that he already set a year? Does he get to be eligible immediately?
Yeah, to that question, there are some nuances to it, right? So for listeners who may not know, May 1st, again, was that deadline to enter the transfer portal, right? Given for fall and spring athletes of any sport, not just football, to have the one-time waiver where you can transfer and be eligible immediately. Now, where that gets tricky is there are some bylaws that if you prior transfer before, it may be a little bit tricky, in which your coach will have to let you out and things of that nature. I know there's some college basketball players who are dealing with that right now currently. To the best of my recollection, Sonoy, Jaylon Robinson fulfilled that sitting out year because he played in less than 4 games, right? So was able to pull back his eligibility before burning through that year. So as best I understand it, and I could be wrong, but as best as I understand it, he would be in the free and clear to transfer and be eligible immediately.
Okay. And I'm kind of speaking for you, but myself anyways, as someone who keeps up with college football, I'm kind of a fan of the transfer portal. I just think it's interesting, something to talk about. It kind of ultimately gives kids another opportunity to test something else, whether for better or for worse, whether they've outplayed where they're at, or they are not getting the playing time that they wanted. They get an opportunity, a free pass, which I like that.
Sure.
However, would you think there needs to be maybe shorten that window instead of having it May, maybe have it March, just because the reason why I asked that, coaches can scheme their entire spring ball and get their stuff. And then, I don't know as to go as far. This might be a bit of a reach. And I know Jalen's not the only one that's done this. He's just the one that sticks out the most, who I know the most about. So that's why we're using him as a quote unquote example. But are kids going to be using their spring highlight film as a recruiting, like, hey, you know what I mean? What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it needs to be moved up short? Do you think it will? Kind of, if you can kind of take that and go with it a little bit.
So I don't even have to give you my thoughts on the Conference USA podcast. We've had 5 head coaches on this offseason: Seth Luttrell, Dana Dimmel, Will Hall, Mike Bloomgren. Of course, I'm forgetting the 5th right now, as we've done so many. I'm just blanking. But my point is this. They all have said, and I've spoken to 6 G5 head coaches this offseason, they all have said that they were greatly looking forward to the May 1 deadline, because at that point, they at least know what they're working with heading into fall. So yes, at some point in my mind, there will have to be some sort of regulation, not just of the transfer portal, but NIL, and that's a whole different discussion. But yes, at some point in time, whether that's moving that deadline up, right? So that way you're not going into spring and devoting your resources and building someone up, and all of a sudden it's like, oh well, they're not going to be part of the program. Now on the flip side, as you mentioned, I'm a fan of the transfer portal. We have coaches who leave at all times, right? So I think players should be allowed that same liberty. But yeah, I do think it is something that eventually there will need to be some regulation. And it is, again, it's tricky, right? Because you can, and I'll pass it back to you on this. We're in the era of free agency, right? And I know that's a buzzword and a buzz term, and a lot of diehard traditionalists don't like to hear that because they think of pay for play and NIL and money and all these things. But Sonoy, you're a North Texas guy. We had Seth Luttrell on, and 7-8 hours, within the 7-8 hour span of us finishing that interview with him, he had 3 defensive linemen enter the portal. Mm-hmm. So now he's looking at it as like, oh man, I thought this might have been a position of strength. And obviously with the Murphy twins leaving and others and Deion Noville graduating, it clearly was going to be a need. But now it's additionally more of a need because you lost 3 defensive linemen, right? So that clearly is something that they'll have to address.
Absolutely. All right. So kind of shifting back towards Jaylon Robinson specifically. And again, this is totally speculation. We have, no insights. And again, not trying to trash Jaylon Robinson by any means, but so his production obviously dipped, and that could be a credit to a litany of different things. But
now hold on. I'm letting you go. There you go. That's a little inside joke between Sonoy and I. am so proud of you, buddy.
Thank you. But anyway, so we see his production go from 2020 being the 900-yard season to 21 being that 300 and pair of touchdowns, whatever. So he decides to hit the portal, and he's getting, I don't know if you saw the video of Lane Kiffin and him in the car together, and that was traditional Lane Kiffin, right? Doing his pulling out all the stops, which I think is very entertaining. I know he probably rubbed some coaches the wrong way, but I think it's really cool. Anyway, so you see the stuff with Lane Kiffin. I think he's visited TCU, and there was even some OU fans saying, hey, come back with Dylan Gabriel, just whatever. But so it's pretty apparent that he's going to go to a Power 5 program. But where do you think that stemmed from? Do you think it's, and I'm not, just speculation. Do you think it's an NIL incentive? Do you think, why now? Like, why go through spring ball? You're coming off a year where your production isn't good. How is he getting all this? Do they just understand what kind of player he is? But what do you think really sparked his desire to jump in the portal?
So no, I think it's a confluence of things, right? And I will bring it back to Jaylon Robinson, but this type of scenario, I don't think that's going to be unique or exclusive to just him. You're going to have players who, from the end of their regular season to the point at which they don't allow that transfer, they're going to realize, oh man, my value has gone up, right? It's just like, Sonoy, if you're an NFL fan and you're entering the last year of your deal and you had a big year, right? And you don't quite know what your value is. My value's risen from before the start of the season. You don't quite know what your value is, but then that start of free agency hits, and all of a sudden you got some teams coming after you. It's like, oh man, wait a minute. I may have wanted to go back to the Texans, or I'm a Buck fan. I'm from Tampa. I may want to go back to the Bucks, but wait a minute, like my value is so much more. I can get this. Again, I'm not saying that's precisely what happened here with Jaylon Robinson. I think it's a confluence of things, but you can't ignore that being a factor. Now, to UCF, they were one of the first G5 programs that I can think of to put together an NIL collective, right, to help keep players in tow at this school. And I'm sure you're familiar with the NIL collective, but I'll give an elevator pitch here as to what that is. That essentially is someone with affiliated with a program, not the university itself, right, but someone who has an affinity for said program may start a fund, a donation type deal, right, where people can say, hey, we're going to put forth money to this collective to help give our student athletes of all sports NIL deals, right? And UCF has done that. You talked about the fact that his numbers dipped. So that's because of injury. He did have a knee injury last year. That's a large part of why why his production dipped, right? In addition to the quarterback situation being, up and down, but it was because of the knee injury. Now, if you're asking me, and this is strictly the opinion of me, you look at the offense that Jaylon Robinson transferred into, the offense that Dillon Gabriel signed at UCF, it's a little bit different from the Gus Malzahn RPO offense, right? If you've watched any bit of Auburn football, SEC football from the time he was there, it is a much different type of offense. In terms of the fundamentals, what they're looking to do. Gus Malzahn's a run-first guy. That's not to say he hasn't had quarterbacks and receivers get drafted and play in the NFL, and players have put up big numbers. But he's using the run to set up other aspects of that offense, right? So that could be a factor in my mind, which you saw Dillon Gabriel leave. Yes, he was going to get pushed from other quarterbacks on the roster, but there's no doubt in my mind Dillon Gabriel, was the best quarterback on that roster, right? He's someone, Sonoy, who had to live in the shadow of Mackenzie Milton. And he was never going to be that guy. But he's certainly a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the nation in my mind. That's why he's at Oklahoma and, probably going to be the starter. But that offense just didn't suit Dillon Gabriel. I think you have the same situation here with Flash Robinson. Maybe it's a situation where it's just, look, clearly he's not having any issue getting any attention, right? Lane Kiffin's recruiting him hard, and I know she has other offers, other opportunities, I'm sure. In addition to, maybe there's some NIL value out there, and maybe just this offense just doesn't suit him anymore. Could be that. Because if you look, I'll finish on this. If you look at Auburn back in their history, it's a lot of bigger receivers who play in that offense, right? Jaylon Robinson, for as dynamic as he is a smaller guy.
Yeah. So he came in 2018. Then he set out for the transfer 2019. Then 2020 he played. So he could have left after the 2020 season. I mean, I'm asking you, right? If he wanted to for the draft.
Yes. Yeah. The 3 years removed. Yes.
Yeah. I wonder, I mean, again, this is just playing, hindsight 2020, but I wonder if he should have. I feel like Jaylon Robinson is a drafted wide receiver talent personally. I mean, again, I may just be biased to him, but do you feel like if he would have left after that 2020 season, he would have got drafted?
That's tough, right? Even though, NFL offenses have evolved and Jaylon Robinson, the guy I could easily see being a slot receiver with such, again, dynamic speed and ability, and also can help in the kick return game. I don't know. I mean, he didn't listen. He had a great year in terms of, the way that UCF offense played, but he wasn't like a 1 year standout like Jameson Williams, for example, right? Who, made the transfer from Ohio State to Bama, I believe, and then had a breakout year. And then, even Jameson Williams, smaller at 6 foot 6'1", $170. Jaylon Robinson is smaller than that, right? So I do think he would have needed. And look, when you look at all things considered, the year that you thought Dillon Gabriel would have before he got banged up as well, you could easily see why Flash Robinson would say, hey, I had 900 and something yards in 2020. I put together a 1,000-yard year in 2021, and then I'm out the door. But that also wasn't the case.
Yeah. Well, all right, Eric, I appreciate your time, and it'll be fun to see where he lands and, just kind of what he does. I mean, again, it's the wild, wild west, and there's so many stories that we could go over, but Jalen was one that was, stuck out to me, and I really appreciate you coming on and giving your 2 cents about the matter.
Anytime, my man. Always a pleasure to jump on with you.
All right, take care.